My husband made me a drink, but the smell was strange. As soon as I brought the glass close, a metallic aroma invaded my nose, making me nauseous. Instead of drinking it, I discreetly swapped my glass with my sister-in-law's, who had always made my life miserable. 30 minutes later, she clung to the table with trembling hands, uncontrollably. "Don't you want to try the drink I made especially for you, darling?" asked my husband Fernando, with a strange smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was sitting at the elegant dining table of my sister-in-law Bianca, at her house in the capital, where we gathered every month for a family brunch. The glass in front of me had a weird smell, almost metallic, that turned my stomach. At 29 years old, I never imagined I would end up wondering if my own husband was trying to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage and countless accidental food poisonings, I learned to be cautious, especially when Bianca was involved. She had a knack for manipulating situations in such a way that I always ended up sick or humiliated, wearing that same innocent smile that Fernando had now. "What a nice gesture from you," I replied, forcing a smile while my mind raced. The aroma coming from the glass was unlike any drink I had ever smelled. It reminded me of the day last month when I ended up in the ER after drinking tea at Bianca's house. The doctors couldn't explain my symptoms, and she insisted she had prepared it exactly the same as hers. Bianca was watching me closely from the other side of the table, stirring her own still untouched drink absent-mindedly. "Fernando has become quite the drink expert lately," she commented with a crooked smile. "He's been testing different methods just for you." The way she emphasized, "for you," made me shudder. Lately, I had noticed that Fernando was spending more and more time at Bianca's house, saying they were planning a surprise for our anniversary, but something didn't add up. The whispered conversations that ended as soon as I entered the room, the strange messages I glimpsed on his phone, and now this drink with a peculiar smell. I lifted the glass, pretending to take a sip while watching their expressions. Fernando and Bianca exchanged a quick glance, which only confirmed my suspicions. Making a show of checking my phone, I stood up abruptly. "Oh, look at that, I need to take a quick work call. Bianca, do you mind if I use your office?" As I walked behind her chair, I pretended to trip, and in the motion of steadying myself, I quickly switched our glasses without anyone noticing. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, straightening up. "I'm such a klutz sometimes." Bianca ignored my apology with a tense smile. "Just try not to mess up anything in my office." I nodded and hurried out, my heart pounding as I crossed the doorway. Now I just had to wait and watch. From my position, I saw Bianca bring the glass to her lips, and a wave of anxiety churned in my stomach. Part of me wanted to stop her, to warn her, but I needed to confirm my suspicions. I had spent too many nights in the ER, too many hours curled up in pain, always after sharing meals with them. It wasn't always like this. When I met Fernando at a friend's wedding 3 years ago, he was charming and attentive. Bianca also seemed kind, inviting me to family gatherings and even offering to help with our wedding preparations. But looking back, should have seen the red flags. The way she always, accidentally, spilled something on my dress at important events, or how my food always had an extra seasoning when she cooked. At first, the incident seemed minor, a stomach ache here, a mild allergic reaction there. Fernando always had a convenient excuse. Maybe it was something you ate before, or maybe you're coming down with something. But over time, the pattern became clear. The worst was 2 months ago when I ended up hospitalized after having breakfast at her house. The doctors found traces of an unknown substance in my system, but Fernando convinced everyone I must have taken some expired medication by mistake. I gripped the doorframe, watching as Bianca took another sip of her drink. Fernando was typing on his phone without a care in the world. My untouched glass still sat on the table, that metallic smell lingering in the air, sending chills down my spine. Then I noticed a slight tremor in Bianca's hand. She set the glass down on the table, her face suddenly turning pale. "Fernando," her voice quivered, "something's not right." Fernando looked up, and his expression shifted from confusion to full-blown panic as he realized she had taken the wrong glass. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. "Bianca, what's happening?" Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. I. She tried to stand but lost her balance, grabbing onto the table to avoid falling. "Fernando, what did you put in this drink?" I stepped out of the office, my phone already recording. Fernando was kneeling beside Bianca, his face paler than ever. That wasn't your glass," he muttered, but the silence in the room made his words ring out clearly. Bianca's eyes widened, fear, and realization dawning in her expression. "Call an ambulance," she begged, sliding to the floor. "Please, I can't." I immediately dialed emergency services, my hand surprisingly steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. I felt oddly in control. Bianca lay on the floor, her body racked with violent spasms. Fernando was next to her, terror etched on his face as he realized his plan had gone horribly wrong. "Emergency services, we need an ambulance at 1542 Central Avenue," I reported calmly, making sure my phone kept recording. "My sister-in-law seems to be having a severe reaction to something she drank. She's conscious but experiencing intense tremors." As I spoke to the dispatcher, Bianca's eyes locked onto mine. The usual coldness in her gaze was gone, replaced with sheer panic. "Clarissa," she gasped, "you switched them, you knew." "Ma'am, help is on the way," the operator assured me. "Please stay on the line." Fernando grew more agitated by the second. "Bianca, what's happening? This wasn't supposed to happen." "Shut up, Fernando," Bianca interrupted through gritted teeth, her anger momentarily surpassing the pain. "This is your fault. You said it would only make her sick enough to miss the board meeting next week. You swore it wouldn't leave a trace." My blood ran cold. The meeting where I was supposed to present my proposal to a key client, the same client Bianca had been trying to win over for months at the rival company. Suddenly, everything made sense. The tea last month, I murmured with a calm that surprised even me, and the breakfast 2 months ago, they weren't accidents, were they? Bianca's face twisted in pain. "The tea was meant to keep you home on the day of the Johnson contract presentation, but you went anyway." She doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Fernando said we just needed to discredit you, make the clients think you were unreliable." The sound of sirens was approaching fast. Fernando stepped back, desperation etched on his face. "No, Bianca, shut up. You don't know what you're saying." "Now I do." The wailing of the ambulance sirens grew louder, mingling with Fernando's frantic whispers and Bianca's groans of pain. I kept my phone recording. My heart was pounding, but my mind was surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I was in control. They were trapped. No time to invent excuses or twist the narrative. Fernando knelt beside Bianca, gripping her shoulders as she fought to stay conscious. Her eyes were wide, her breathing ragged, but he didn't seem truly concerned for her health. He was terrified about something else, what would come next. "Hold on, Bianca. The ambulance is almost here," he whispered, but the sideways glance he shot at me gave him away. He knew I had heard. He knew I knew. The paramedics burst into the house, their uniforms clashing with Bianca's pristine decor. They asked quick questions, checked her vitals, and placed her on a stretcher without wasting time. Bianca was pale as a corpse, her body shaken by uncontrollable tremors. "Is someone going with her?" one of the paramedics asked Fernando. "Yes," he replied immediately, still nervous, and followed them toward the door. But before they could leave, my voice stopped him. "I'm going too." Fernando turned to look at me, his face a mix of surprise and panic. "That's not necessary, Clarissa. She's my sister-in-law, and I want to make sure she gets proper care." I crossed my arms, firm. He knew he couldn't argue. He knew if he tried to stop me, it would only make things worse. He swallowed hard and continued behind the paramedics. At the hospital, the wait was endless. I sat in the emergency room, watching doctors move quickly while Fernando paced, biting his nails. He didn't look at me. The tension between us was unbearable, but I remained silent, just waiting. When a doctor finally came out of the room where Bianca was being treated, Fernando nearly jumped out of his seat. "Is she okay? Will she recover?" he asked urgently. The doctor frowned, scanning his clipboard. "She's stable for now, but we need to know exactly what was in that drink. We did some preliminary tests and found traces of an unidentified substance in her system." Fernando faltered. I don't know. It could have been an allergic reaction." A dry, sarcastic laugh escaped my lips, making him finally look at me. "An allergic reaction, Fernando? Really?" The doctor glanced between us, suspicious. "The police have already been informed. Since there's a possibility of poisoning, we have to file a report and wait for lab results." The word police made Fernando even paler. He tried to look composed, but I saw his jaw clench. I said nothing, just stared at him. I knew the game had changed. It didn't take long for an officer to arrive. He began with basic questions, taking notes in his notebook. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I was at Bianca's house when Fernando made me a drink. It smelled strange, so I didn't drink it. Bianca, unknowingly, took my glass instead. Minutes later, she began experiencing severe tremors. The officer raised an eyebrow. Do you believe there was malicious intent? I looked Fernando straight in the eyes. I have proof. I took out my phone, opened the recording, and pressed play. Bianca's voice echoed in the room. This is your fault. You said it would only make her sick enough to miss the board meeting next week. You swore it couldn't be traced. The officer's expression changed, and Fernando's eyes widened in sheer terror. That's not what it sounds like. Bianca was delirious. She didn't know what she was saying. She sounded pretty lucid to me, I replied coldly. We'll have to investigate this further, the officer said. Mr. Fernando, you need to come with us to give a statement. Fernando tried to justify himself, mumbling excuses, but the officers didn't care. They took him away while he looked back at me, desperate. Later, I was informed that Bianca remained under observation, but the lab tests showed it wasn't the first time she had been exposed to something suspicious. Curious, I thought. If Fernando had been poisoning me slowly, he had been doing the same to her. The following days were a whirlwind of statements, evidence, and revelations. The case became a scandal, especially when investigations revealed that Fernando and Bianca were involved in corporate fraud. They manipulated contracts, embezzled funds, and used my deteriorating health to sabotage my career and make me look unreliable to clients. In the end, Fernando was found guilty of attempted poisoning and fraud. Bianca, who slowly recovered, had to cooperate with police to reduce her sentence. And I, after years of humiliation, betrayal, and being used as a mere pawn in their dirty game, was finally free. I made sure to be present at Fernando's final sentencing hearing. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw something different in him. No arrogance, no control. Only fear. Only defeat. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. He tried to destroy me, but in the end, he was the one who fell. And I moved forward, stronger, wiser, and with no one left to make me doubt myself again. Fernando's arrest was just the beginning. When the police took him away, Bianca was still in the hospital, sedated and surrounded by doctors trying to stabilize her. I could have left it at that, moved on and let the system take care of the rest. But that wasn't enough. I spent days waiting for the right moment, following the news about Bianca and listening to rumors around the hospital. I learned that she was recovering, that doctors had managed to neutralize the effects of the substance in her system. She was alive but weakened, and soon she would be well enough to face what awaited her. When they finally transferred her to the psychiatric unit of the hospital for a mental evaluation before her trial, I knew it was the perfect opportunity. I found the ideal moment on her third day of hospitalization. She was under observation, with no access to regular visits except for lawyers and doctors. But there's always a way to get around such barriers. I didn't need to enter her room or be present when it happened. I just had to make sure she got the message. I saw a young nurse, new at the hospital, someone who had no idea who I was. With a friendly smile, I handed him a sealed bottle of water. "Hi, could you do me a favor?" I asked casually. "My sister-in-law is in room 213. I heard she hasn't been drinking enough water. Could you take this to her?" The guy hesitated for a second, but the hospital's fast pace didn't allow much time for questions. He took the bottle without thinking too much and nodded. "Sure." I watched from afar as he walked down the hall and entered her room. I waited a few minutes, and when I saw him come out, I knew she had received it. Now, I just had to wait. Half an hour later, I entered the hospital as if I were simply there to speak with the doctors about Fernando, the supposed victim in the situation, at least in the eyes of the press. I walked calmly down the hall to room 213 and knocked on the door. Bianca's weak voice came from inside, "Come in." I opened the door slowly and stepped in without hurry. Bianca was sitting on the bed, her skin pale, her eyes tired, but there was still a trace of arrogance in her, even if much dimmed. The empty water bottle rested on the nightstand next to her bed. She looked at me warily, trying to figure out why I was there. "Hi, Bianca," I murmured, approaching calmly. She didn't reply. Her eyes just scanned me, looking for any sign of danger. I glanced at the bottle and then back at her, leaning slightly closer. I hope you enjoyed the water. I personally made sure you got it. The impact on her face was immediate. Her body tensed. Her hands began to tremble slightly. What? She looked at the bottle, then at me, then back at the bottle. Oh, Bianca, I sighed, lowering my voice a little. I left you a special little gift inside. Panic overwhelmed her instantly. She leaned forward, sticking her fingers down her throat, trying to force herself to vomit. Her eyes opened wide, filled with pure terror. No. No, she gasped, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The scene was pathetic, her desperation, uncertainty, absolute fear. Everything I had felt every time I left a dinner with them. Every time I got sick without knowing why. Every time I wondered if I'd wake up the next day. This can't be happening, she murmured, pressing her hands against her stomach as if expecting something to begin devouring her from within. I stood there, watching, savoring every second. Then, when I felt she was on the verge of completely losing control, I gave her a small smile and stood up. Well, it was a pleasure seeing you, Bianca. Enjoy the little gift. I turned and left the room without another word. Only when I was outside the hospital, feeling the fresh air on my skin, did I allow myself to laugh. She would never know. She would never be sure. But the truth was, the water didn't have anything at all. Time passed, but the terror in Bianca's eyes that day was burned into my memory as a priceless souvenir. After leaving the hospital, I never looked back. I didn't need to. I knew she was submerged in her own fear, feeling every second of uncertainty consume her sanity. The following days were hell for her. Bianca refused to eat anything offered to her, convinced someone was still trying to poison her. The doctors tried to reassure her, but she lost control, demanding toxicology tests, begging to be transferred, screaming that she wasn't safe at the hospital. It became a scandal. Doctors and nurses whispered about the paranoid woman who trembled at the sight of a simple glass of water. She crumbled. I heard that one night, they found her in the bathroom, trying to make herself vomit, even though she hadn't eaten in hours. She was declared mentally unstable and placed under psychiatric surveillance. I didn't have to do anything else but watch from a distance. The terror I planted in her grew on its own. Fernando met his own fate. He was convicted and locked in a cell where, for the first time in his life, he was nobody. With no money to pay for high-end lawyers, no contacts to save him, he had to face reality like any other criminal. Prison broke him. Once arrogant, now he was just another inmate trying to survive. It didn't take long for rumors to spread that he even avoided drinking water, afraid someone might make him pay the same way he had tried to with me. I moved on. I sold the house I had shared with Fernando. I got rid of everything that reminded me of that chapter in my life and started over elsewhere. Over time, I stopped thinking about them. But fate didn't allow Bianca to disappear from my life completely. Months later, by chance, I overheard a group talking about a woman who had been institutionalized permanently, a former wealthy and powerful businesswoman now reduced to a shadow of herself, locked away in a high-security psychiatric hospital because no one could handle her paranoia. That's when I knew Bianca never recovered. I discovered that after her forced commitment, she refused to drink anything unless it was handed directly by a family member. But ironically, she had no one left. Her family distanced themselves, her friends vanished, and she was completely alone. When she was transferred to a private clinic, she became a problematic patient, obsessed with the idea that someone was still trying to kill her. One night, a nurse, tired of her constant screaming, placed a glass of water in front of her and said, "You think you've been poisoned? Then don't drink it. But if you don't, you'll die of thirst. You decide." They say Bianca sat motionless for hours, staring at the glass, crying without stopping. In the end, she drank it and survived. But that didn't calm her. Quite the opposite. She became even more convinced they were just waiting for the right moment. I never had to touch her. Never had to do anything else but let her own mind do the work for me. Bianca lived the same hell I did, but unlike me, she never escaped it. And I moved on. I didn't become bitter or vengeful. I simply understood that sometimes, the worst punishment doesn't come from direct action, but from fear. And ironically, Bianca herself taught me that. She tried to destroy me with poison. But in the end, all it took to destroy her was a simple glass of water.